Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Manon, and I'm super happy to be here to talk to you about those topics of no-code and diversity, and as Shubham said, how to try to think about how to not to make the same diversity mistakes in no-code than the one we made with software engineering. So first of all, I would like to know who are you. So maybe if you are like software engineer, if you could raise your hand. Okay. Maybe if you are a no-code maker. Okay, so way more. And maybe a product managers. Okay. Okay, thank you. And also, how do you consider yourself with no-code? Would you rather say that you are a beginner? Okay, don't be shy, it's okay, you're welcome. And maybe if you are an expert, or you consider as an expert? Okay, don't be shy too, it's okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have a really good mix of people with like more like product managers and also engineers and no-code makers, which is really interesting because I would like to take everyone with me to this topic. And also, it's really made for beginners, but also for experts. So I'm really happy to see that it's really diverse. First of all, before to jump into the topic, I would like to talk about a few bunches of received ideas that I've heard a lot when I started NoCode, and you probably did too. The first one is that NoCode is really good to associate with professional retraining. Because there is this idea that actually no-code doesn't need to have a specific profile or background, and that no-code tools are designed and equally open to everyone. There is also this idea that tomorrow, if you start making your business in no-code or if you train in no-code, you could easily reach 400 euros or 500 euros a day. And there is this idea that you can work from everywhere in the world and be like completely free. And I've heard a lot about the fact that the world seems to need approximately 100,000 no-code makers by 2025, which is like a lot. I've also heard a lot about the fact that everyone could be one of those no-code makers, and that actually you would just need a computer and some motivation to start, and that finally no-code tools are like super easy to use and then really accessible. And last but not least, I've really heard a lot about the fact that if you use no-code tools and you create no-code tools, you could actually change a bit the world by making it more inclusive. And this is really due to the fact that the no-code community would be like super diverse, inclusive. You're gonna feel like welcome, even as a beginner. It's gonna be super easy for you. And then you could also participate to a bigger change, which is like to change the tech and IT world itself. But I don't know about you, but me, when I started, I realized that things were a bit different. And that all those kind of speeches were mostly marketing. And I don't know if it's the case for you. If it isn't, it's really nice. It means that you are lucky. And maybe also probably a bit privileged, which is okay. Actually, we all have some privileges. It's just really important to be aware of it. And I'm going to talk about this later. But maybe start to think that if it was super easy for you to get into no-code and to jump into it, it probably means that you had some advantages from the beginning. My talk is also about breaking those received ideas, because I think that it really doesn't help us. And when I say us, it's us as creators, as users, but also for all the other people who would like to maybe to go to IT and thanks to no-code to get professionalized into it. I think this really doesn't help us. And actually, there are really a few data about it. So it's something that we heard a lot, that no-code is diverse and inclusive, but it's really hard to measure because we have really few data. And the few that we have show actually the contrary. which is that in 2022, a survey within the NoCode France community where 375% responded, they actually said that there was only 32% of women, which is really, really less, and that there was 68% of men within the community, and that, which is really interesting to look about this, is that 72% of no-coders actually have a higher degree than a bachelor. And as a comparison, within the French population, only 30% of people have between 25 and 44 years have a higher diploma than a bachelor. So they are really overrepresented in the no-code community. And also something really interesting for me, in my opinion, is that actually 75% of the no-coders studied scientifics, IT, or economics, which is like a huge majority, and which shows that if we look at those data, the situation is not that far than what we can find in typical and traditional software engineering. And I would like to catch also your attention about those topics, to ask you, if you look quickly at this picture, what do you see? We are not so many, so you can really speak loudly if you are not too shy. 4 women. 4 women, men? White men. Okay. So actually, yeah. It's really funny because I'm making this speech here, and people send me this and say like, oh, but did you see? It's like, it's almost a shame because there are so less women and so less people of colors and everything. But actually, for me, it's a really good summary of the situation. We say that no-code is super inclusive because we would like it to be, but actually, if we look at what it actually is, the reality is a bit different. And in my opinion, this shows also that intentions are really good, but it's not enough, especially when you talk about diversity, because everyone wants a more diverse world, and especially in tech and in no-code. But actually, it's super hard to make it this way because, for example, if you organize an event, you're gonna, maybe you like, as Shubham did, to have many women and maybe many people of colors. But you're going to face a hard reality, which is hard to accept also, that those kind of people, they maybe doesn't exist, or if they exist, they are maybe underrepresented, they don't have visibility, they don't consider themselves as an expert, so they are not going to feel legit to talk. If they come and talk, maybe they're going to cancel just before because they're not going to feel good about it. So it's really important to understand that I'm not here to blame it. I'm just here to make a statement and be like, okay, this is reality. So instead of being blind to it, it's really important to face it. But if, like me, you also came in the no-code world with this optimistic idea that things were going to change and that the no-code revolution can make things change in the IT and tech sector, you could be also like, how does it come and why is it like this? Because we all have those good intentions and all the speeches, so how did it come that we are like this today? And actually, it's really important to consider that no-code isn't out of society. Even though it's a revolution, it changes way to do IT, to develop applications and so on, actually, it's still part of our societies, and it's also part of tech and IT sectors, which are mostly man's worlds. And women are really underrepresented in IT and digital in general. There are only 30%, and within those 30%, only 70% are software engineers. And which is really interesting to see is that 41% of the women in IT, so within this 30%, 41% of them quit their job after 10 years in career in IT because it's really complicated for them to make their path there. And only 17% of men do this churn. So it's really relevant. And also, if we want to understand why is it like this, for example, in 2021, there was a study and a survey on 800 teenagers, and only 33% of them declares that their parents, that girls were encouraged by their parents to study IT or digital, versus 61% of boys, which is a huge gap. And also, as a consequence of it, in 2020, only one startup on 5 was created or founded by a woman or a mixed team. And another important thing is that intentions are good, but they are really not enough. And diversity isn't about willingness, it's about turning it into efficient actions. So as you see, good intentions are the first step, but you need to do way more to also raise it and like make sure that people really understand and acknowledge there are social inequities. This is the second step, and to realize that advantages and opportunities aren't equally distributed in society. But also it's important to activate this diversity and to define clear goals, objectives, and metrics, like you would do for any IT product, for example, and also to understand that inclusion is not a statement, it's not something that you reach someday, it's really something constant and dynamic that you need to embody, and it's a process, actually. And as an example of this idea that it's not because there is no code that it's inclusive by nature, most of the jobs linked to these two objects are masculine, because only 13% of women are in construction, and it's the same in software engineering. So we could easily understand that there is no point about why women cannot use them with their hands, or it wasn't designed for them. It's something more about social norms and something that is really beyond us. And there are multiple factors for this, is like the lack of knowledge of opportunities, because for example, me, as a woman, I'm not going to project myself into those sectors because I don't know what I could do there. But also there are some sexist behaviors and some stereotypes. For example, I'm going to think like, okay, if I want to study IT, I need to be a geek, I need to love video games, and I need to be super good at mathematics, which is not my case, so I'm not going to feel welcome in this. And also there are huge gender gaps in education, which makes that as a woman, we're not going to push you to do the same studies and the same career path than as a man. So it's really important to understand that no tool is discriminating or inclusive by nature. It's really the social uses that we make out of it that creates inclusion or exclusion. So finally, we could really wonder ourselves, all of this being said, how is it possible that no-code tools could fight and replace all those strong social standards, behaviors, and also stereotypes we have, as if by magic? And the argument we sometimes hear is that, yeah, but you don't need to code, so everyone is welcome. But as you see, it's not possible that all of those big statements can be fight just without coding. So you may wonder what we should do or what could we do out of it, and actually what could we do to make no-code really more diverse and inclusive, and what could we make and do about all those pitches which are like super optimistic and full of hope and good intentions, even though it's marketing. What could we do out of them, because they are really like good intentions, and as we saw, it's the first step to do something for diversity. So what could we do out of it? And is it something good to maybe throw everything away and say it's bad, it's lies, and we shouldn't listen to this? In my opinion, it's really important to have a more nuanced opinion about it, to understand it better and to see where we could act. But what's for sure is that it's impossible to fight something that doesn't exist. So it's important to be aware of this lack of diversity in IT and to acknowledge that no-code is part of this, and that also if you don't have any data, you cannot measure, so you cannot say no-code is diverse if you cannot show it and prove it. And keeping saying that we are so much diverse and inclusive without being aware of it and without having also data to measure it is the best way to make sure that we will never be. And this is a good example of what people can feel in those kind of situations, is that everyone tells them they are welcome, but actually they come and they realize that nothing was designed for them, but everyone keeps telling them, no, but it's good for you, it's inclusive, it was designed especially for you, everyone is welcome, so you're going to feel really excluded. Maybe you're not going to even understand this, and it's going to be super hard for you to know what to do to get included, and it's going to be even more violent than if people wouldn't tell you you are welcome. So I don't want to break everything, but all of this being said and all those statements made, I still think I'm a bit like getting schizophrenic about it, because I still really want no-code, and I'm super optimistic about the fact that no-code is an opportunity to make IT and tech more diverse, but I still think it's important to stay also critical about it, to do things on the good way. So it's important not to throw the baby with the bathwater, but we should understand that there are some positive things about it. As it's marketing, it brings new people in those sectors, which is super good, as users and as creators also. But as it's mostly marketing, it can appear that it's not real. So maybe people can feel that it's a big lie, and it can be twice as violent as if we wouldn't say those people were welcome. And also, I'm not going to learn it to you, but no-code tools are abstractions of programming languages, so you will need to understand its logic to use them. And if before you hadn't any studies that make you understand Boolean or algorithmic logic, you're going to struggle more than someone else to get all those new ways of thinking. And it's something really important to consider. So my point today wasn't to blame people, organizers, and all the people that are designing tools and trainings and everything. On the contrary, me, like many people in no-code, I would love it to be more diverse and inclusive, and I really want to give you some keys and to sow some seeds that you can live with and activate in your everyday life maybe, or maybe just think about it later. But I wanted to give you a few do's and don'ts. So the first don'ts, there are three. It's not to underestimate what it takes to become a no-coder, and all the path that it takes, and all the struggles that people may have by trying to learn those new tools and those kind of logics. Also, try not to give unsolicited opinion or advices. We all want to do it so sometimes, and it's kind of normal, but it's also super important to stop ourselves doing this and just to show empathy to people, because put yourself into their shoes. If you are really trying to learn something new, if so many experts come and tell you, no, but you should do this, do that, do this, and you can't even try it before, you're gonna feel like shit, and you're probably gonna surrender and leave at some point. So even though you have good intentions about it, it can be super unproductive and toxic. And also, it's something I've heard a lot about no-code, especially in companies, is that no-code tools are super user-friendly by nature, and that you don't really need to do some change management, because users are going to like them magically, and it's going to be super easy to use. This is wrong. And it's super important also when you train some other people to just consider this. I wanted to give you more do's than don'ts. So about the do's and the thing that you can really do or think about is to be aware and to spread this idea that I said about the whole logic to get. And for someone who's really outside of all this, it's going to be super easy, and the person is going to like the fact that you're going to say, okay, it's harder for you maybe than it was for me, but it's for a reason. And here I give you some tools to help you to get this new logic. It's important also to show people around you, in the community, the people you're working with, your customers, that you are making mistakes too, and that you are still testing and experimenting things, even though you are an expert. And to really learn to listen to beginners, to newbies, and to learn about their experience and their learning path. Because even though you are an expert, you can learn from it, and you can also adapt your speech and the way you give the tools to the users, and also the way you build them. Think also about your position that you have as an expert and which space you give or not to the people that are beginners. And sometimes it means putting your ego aside. Try to not to teach people, teach people how to fish instead of giving them a fish, because it's really important to empower them and instead of giving them solutions. And also about inclusivity, try to give more space for more space and exposure to underrepresented groups like women, people with disability, racialized people, LGBTQA, people with less graduations than you. They have less visibility, as we've seen, so if you want them to get some more, you also need to give them some space. Create role models that aren't extraordinary, because it's really nice in the community to have people, for example, like Shubham, but maybe some people like me, they need to get identified to someone maybe different and who makes less extraordinary things. And also be aware of your own unconscious biases and privileges, because we all have some, and don't be afraid to voice them aloud. And for example, when Shubham invited me to this speech, at the beginning, I was like, oh my God, it's impossible, I cannot do it, I'm not legit. And he said, no, but it's okay, me too, sometimes I have this imposture syndrome. But he also told me, okay, but I'm a man, I come from software engineering too, so my position is going to be different than yours. And I really appreciated it, because it helps me to make to feel just secure and confident. So to conclude, I would like to talk to you about my personal example, because if I'm telling this, it's because, of course, I feel concerned. I come from studies at university in political sciences, which is like super far from engineering, mathematics, and logic. And I actually accidentally landed in the IT and no code, and I decided to convert into it. Today, it's really like a full success for me, because I am a product builder and I'm specialized in social impact, which is like super great. But the way to get there was sometimes really, really hard. And this speech we have about the accessibility of no code, it allows me to project myself into it, which was good. But when I take some distance now, I'm like, okay, it took me way more effort than for some other people. And because I hadn't the good background and no one told me. And it was sometimes hard for me to carve out a place in this world, but also just to create tools and to use them. And I was working with software engineers. We were like, yeah, do this with Airtable. It's super easy. It's going to take you 5 minutes. And I was like, okay, am I stupid? Because it took me a whole night. And I was like, okay, maybe I did something wrong. So really think about the wheelchair in front of the stairs. It's really the same kind of feeling that we can have. And when I think back about it, I would have 100% preferred to know that there was other issues I was fighting against and to have the proper tools to be able to get these new logics. And still, I know that I'm super lucky and privileged. I'm white, I made 6 years studies, so there are some people for who it was easier, but for some people for who it was harder too. So to conclude, I would really like you to understand that no-code is really a nice opportunity window for more diversity in IT and digital. That no-code tools represent this opportunity because there are smaller amounts of practitioners. That's why we talk also about a revolution. We can still act and do things. And the learning curve, of course, is way shorter than for traditional software engineering. But really keep this idea with you, please, that no code isn't inclusive by nature, and we should stop spreading this idea, because it's really our uses that make it more or less inclusive and not the topic itself. So if we really want to make no-code more inclusive, we really need to work on it, especially if we talk about this no-code revolution. And we really need to work on it to transform this really nice opportunity window into a reality. Thank you.